In a small, modestly furnished suburban house, Clara lives a life of quiet solitude. Each day unfolds much like the one before, with the early morning sun casting long shadows across her well-worn kitchen floor. The clock ticks monotonously, marking the hours filled more with silence than with conversation. The walls, adorned with fading photographs, tell the story of a vibrant family life that once was. In one picture, a younger Clara beams at a graduation ceremony, surrounded by her children, all smiles and success. Yet, now the house rarely echoes with the sound of their laughter. The children, now adults with their own bustling lives, visit only sporadically, their careers pulling them into a distant orbit around their mother. Clara, now 89, moves slowly around her living room, dusting off the shelves that hold various trinkets and memoirs from her past. Her movements are deliberate, a testament to the years that have weighed down on her bones but not her spirit. As she arranges a vase of fresh flowers, a rare treat she allows herself, she muses aloud, "Another week, and maybe this time, they'll remember to call." The phone, sitting unobtrusively on a small table by her favorite armchair, seldom rings. And when it does, hope flickers in Clara's eyes, only to be extinguished when it's merely a telemarketer or a wrong number. Today, she had decided to reach out herself, dialing her son Michael's number only to be greeted by his voicemail, "You've reached Michael. Sorry I can't come to the phone right now, but please leave a message." "Hello, dear, it's Mom. Just wanted to hear your voice. I hope you're all doing well. Maybe we can..." Her voice trails off, not wanting to sound too needy. "Well, just call me when you can. Love you." She hangs up with a soft sigh, the kind that has become all too familiar. Sitting back in her armchair, Clara picks up a worn-out book from the stack that lies on her side table. As she reads, her mind often wanders back to the days when the house was full of noise and life. Birthday parties, holiday dinners, impromptu visits. Those days now seem like echoes of a distant past, growing fainter with each passing year. Her reverie is broken by the sharp ring of the doorbell. Surprised, Clara shuffles to the door, her heart beating a little faster with anticipation. Peering through the peephole, her face brightens for the first time that day. Standing outside is her neighbor, Joan, holding a basket covered with a cloth. "Joan, dear, what a pleasant surprise!" Clara exclaims as she opens the door, her voice tinged with genuine warmth. "I thought you might like some of these muffins I baked. I had extra batter, and I remembered how much you loved them last time," Joan says, stepping inside and heading towards the kitchen, as familiar with the house as her own. "Oh, you always remember, don't you? Sit down, let's have some tea," Clara offers, her spirits lifted by the company. As they sit together at the kitchen table, sipping tea and sharing muffins, Clara talks about her children, her voice a mixture of pride and longing. "They're all so busy, you know. Successful, which is wonderful, but I do miss them." Joan listens, nodding sympathetically. "They're lucky to have you, Clara. They just don't know what they're missing out on." The afternoon wanes, and Joan eventually looks at her watch. "I better get going, Clara. But let's do this again soon, all right?" "Thank you, Joan. I'd like that very much," Clara replies, escorting her friend to the door. As the door closes behind Joan, Clara feels the solitude settling back around her like an old, familiar blanket. She returns to her armchair, the earlier warmth from Joan's visit lingering in her heart. Just as she resumes her reading, a sudden knock on the door startles her. This time, it's the postman, with a letter that looks far too official to be just another bill. Clara's hands tremble slightly as she takes the envelope. The return address is from a law firm she doesn't recognize. Curious and a bit apprehensive, she opens it, her eyes scanning the contents quickly at first, then more slowly as the weight of the words sinks in. The letter begins, "Dear Mrs. Clara Bennett, we are writing to inform you of a matter of great importance regarding an inheritance from the estate of Mr. Edward Langley." As Clara reads on, the room seems to grow brighter, the words on the page blurring into a promise of something entirely unexpected, setting the stage for dramatic changes and revelations yet to come. Clara, still standing by the door, her hands trembling with the unexpected weight of the envelope, carefully tears it open. Inside, a letter, typed on thick, cream-colored paper, smells faintly of ink and age. The formality of the script seems to echo through the quiet of her small living room. "Dear Mrs. Clara Bennett," the letter begins, its words meticulously crafted. Clara's eyes widen as she reads on. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been named the sole beneficiary in the last will and testament of Mr. Edward Langley, recently deceased." Clara's breath hitches. Edward Langley. The name stirs a whirlpool of memories, each one a vivid flash of laughter, adventure, and the bittersweet tang of young love. Edward, her Edward, had been a man of remarkable charm and daring, an explorer whose stories of distant lands and hidden treasures had once filled her youth with dreams and desires. She sinks into her chair, the letter resting on her lap. Outside, the world moves on, unaware of the monumental shift occurring in the quiet confines of her home. As she reads each word, each sentence, the reality of the situation begins to crystallize. Edward had left her not just an inheritance but a legacy, a final testament to a love she had thought long buried under the weight of practical, everyday life. According to the provisions of Mr. Langley's will, you are entitled to the entirety of his estate, including assets, properties, and a significant amount of personal effects which he believed would be of sentimental value to you. The letter details procedures, legal jargon that dances around the magnitude of what is being given and what is being returned, a past she thought she had lost. "Oh, Eddie," she whispers to the room, to the memories, as tears well up in her eyes. "What have you done?" The rest of the day passes in a haze. Clara moves through her home, each step an effort as she processes the enormity of what has happened. The evening finds her at the dining table, the letter and several photographs of Edward spread out before her. She touches a photo gently, tracing the lines of a face she had loved, still loves. Her reverie is interrupted by the ring of the phone. It's her daughter, Annabelle, the first call in weeks. "Mom, how are you? I was just thinking about you." Clara's voice is soft, but steady. Well, there's news, Annie. Something incredible." "Oh." Annabelle's interest is piqued, a note of curiosity threading through her tone. "Edward Langley has passed away. But he left me something, Annie. He left me a fortune." There is a pause, a breath held over miles of wire. "Edward, the explorer? Mom, that's unbelievable." "Yes, it is," Clara agrees, her mind racing. This news, this incredible turn of events, it wasn't just a windfall. It was an opportunity, a chance to bring her family together, to test their love, their loyalty, and perhaps, to teach them the value of what truly matters. "Mom, what are you going to do?" Annabelle asks, a note of concern threading her voice. Clara smiles, a plan beginning to form in her heart, a spark kindled by the past, fueled by the future. "I have an idea, my dear. A way to bring us all together. But I need to think it through. Can you come visit soon?" I'll try, Mom. Work's just been so hectic. We'll talk soon, Annie. Love you." Clara hangs up, her decision firming with each passing moment. She would not simply accept this inheritance. She would use it to remind her children of what it means to be a family, of what it means to care. As night falls and Clara prepares for bed, her thoughts are a mixture of excitement and resolve. Tomorrow, she decides, she will begin her plans in earnest. She will call her lawyer, set things in motion. Her children, her family, they would learn, they would see. And it all would start with a simple invitation, a request, a challenge disguised as a plea for help. With a deep breath, Clara turns off the bedside lamp, the room around her darkening as she closes her eyes, her heart beating a steady, hopeful rhythm as she drifts into sleep, dreams of past adventures mingling with hopes for the future. As the first light of dawn seeped through the curtains of her bedroom, Clara awoke with a clear purpose. Today, she would set her plan into motion, a plan that would test the fabric of her family, threading the needle between deception and revelation. Sitting up in her bed, she reached for the notepad and pen that always rested on her nightstand, her thoughts already forming the words she would use. After a simple breakfast, Clara sat at her old mahogany desk, the morning sun casting a warm glow across its surface. She picked up her pen and began to write letters to each of her children. Her hand was steady, her script elegant, each letter infused with just enough worry and weariness to be convincing without being overly dramatic. "Dear Michael," she started, her heart twinging with a mix of guilt and resolve. "I find myself in a rather difficult position and must ask for your help. It seems the tides of fortune have turned against me, and I am facing some financial troubles. I would like to spend more time with you and the rest of the family. Perhaps you could come and stay with me for a while? I miss you dearly and need your support during these trying times." One by one, she wrote to Annabelle, to Elizabeth, to her youngest, John, each letter a variation of the same theme: a mother in need, a family needed to come together. She sealed each envelope with a sense of purpose, knowing that the words she had crafted were lures to draw her children back to the nest, not just to aid her but to rediscover the bonds that had frayed over time. Later that day, Clara sat in her living room, the letters stacked neatly on the coffee table, waiting for the postman to arrive. Her heart fluttered with a concoction of anticipation and anxiety. She knew the power of her words. She knew the allure of guilt and obligation. Yet, as she heard the mail slot clink and the soft thud of letters hitting the floor, her resolve hardened. This was necessary, not just for her but for them. Over the next few days, Clara received her responses. The phone calls came, each child expressing their shock and concern, their voices a mixture of confusion and dutiful care. "Mom, are you sure things are that bad?" Michael's voice was tinged with disbelief and worry. "Yes, my dear, it's quite a mess," Clara responded, her voice trembling just enough to convey distress. "But having you all here, even for a little while, would mean the world to me." "We'll figure something out, Mom. We'll come and help," Elizabeth added, her tone firm and decisive. "Let's discuss it when we all get there." "We need a plan," John suggested, ever the pragmatic one. As the days turned into weeks, preparations were made. Clara watched as her home, once quiet and still, buzzed with the energy of impending arrivals. She cleaned and arranged the guest rooms, each brushstroke of the duster and fluff of the pillows a part of the stage she was setting. When the day arrived, one by one, her children returned to the family home. Their faces were etched with concern, their greetings filled with cautious affection. They came bearing suitcases and, unknowingly, the weight of Clara's expectations. As they settled in, Clara acted the part of the distressed mother perfectly. "I can't tell you how much it means to me, having you all here," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears that were not entirely feigned. Michael, looking around the old living room, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, it's been a while since we were all under one roof. Let's make the best of it, huh?" Their nods were tentative, their smiles strained, but as they gathered around the dinner table that evening, a semblance of the old warmth began to flicker to life. Clara watched them, her heart both heavy and hopeful. As the night drew on, they shared stories of their lives away from home, the conversation a mix of laughter and somber confessions. Clara listened, her plan unfolding around her, the deception deepening not just for her children's sake but for what she hoped it would eventually restore. That night, as Clara lay in bed, listening to the familiar yet foreign sounds of her house alive with her children's presence, she knew the next chapter was about to begin. Tomorrow, she would see just how deep their loyalty ran, and perhaps start mending the fragile threads of their family fabric. As the dawn painted the sky a soft blush, the first of Clara's children arrived. Michael, the eldest, drove up the familiar gravel path, his car laden with more than just his luggage. His recent divorce and the ongoing custody battle for his two children weighed heavily on him. He stepped out, stretching his legs and taking a deep breath before approaching the house. Clara watched from the window, her heart a mix of anticipation and trepidation. She opened the door before he could knock, a practiced smile on her face. "Michael, darling, it's so good to see you," she said, her arms open wide. "Hi, Mom," Michael responded, his voice weary, his embrace somewhat stiff. "It's good to see you too. I wish it were under better circumstances." As they stepped inside, Michael glanced around, the familiar setting a stark contrast to the chaos of his current life. "The place hasn't changed much," he remarked, setting his suitcase down. "No, not much," Clara agreed, leading him to the kitchen where coffee awaited. "I thought we'd start the day with a good old chat, just like we used to." Michael nodded, his mind clearly elsewhere. As they sipped their coffee, he shared snippets of his struggles, his voice laced with frustration and fatigue. Clara listened, her role as the comforting mother never more critical than now. The next to arrive was Elizabeth, her career in high finance leaving little room for anything else. Her phone buzzed continuously as she entered, a briefcase in one hand and a travel mug in the other. "Mom, I can only stay for a few weeks. The firm is in the middle of a big merger," she explained, her tone apologetic yet distant. Clara nodded, understandingly. "Any time with you is precious, Lizzie," she said, trying to mask her disappointment. "Let's try to make the most of it." John, the youngest, was the last to arrive. His startup had just folded, and the loss was evident in his slumped shoulders and forlorn expression. "Hey, Mom," he greeted Clara quietly, his hug more a search for comfort than a greeting. "John, my boy, I'm here for you," Clara assured him, patting his back gently as they walked inside. As evening approached, Annabelle finally made it, her face flushed from rushing directly from the airport, her life as a consultant demanding her constant presence across the country. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare," she sighed, dropping her bags at the door and collapsing onto the sofa. "That's quite all right, Annie. You're here now, and that's what matters," Clara responded, her words soothing. Dinner that evening was a cacophony of clinking cutlery and strained conversation. The dining table, once a place of laughter and lengthy discussions, now felt cramped, the air thick with unspoken tensions and unresolved issues. Michael complained about his ex-wife's demands. Elizabeth intermittently checked her emails. John's responses were monosyllabic, and Annabelle seemed more interested in her upcoming projects than the meal. Clara observed the dynamics, her heart sinking yet determined. She cleared her throat, attempting to steer the conversation towards lighter topics. "Remember the summers we spent at the lake? Those were wonderful times," she prompted, hoping to ignite some shared joy. The mention of past vacations did draw some smiles and a few nostalgic anecdotes, easing the atmosphere slightly. "Yeah, those were simpler times," Michael admitted, a rare smile crossing his face. As they reminisced, the walls of the house seemed to expand, the weight of their individual worlds temporarily lifted. However, the undercurrent of why they were all summoned remained, an unspoken agenda that each was aware of yet reluctant to address directly. That night, as Clara retired to her room, she felt the first stirrings of hope that perhaps this reunion, however reluctant, might serve as the bridge back to each other. Tomorrow, she contemplated, would be the beginning of a deeper engagement, a chance to mend the frayed edges of their family tapestry. As the house settled into quiet, the stage was set for old wounds to heal and for new understandings to be forged, one conversation, one shared memory at a time. As the days unfurled into weeks, a subtle shift began within the walls of Clara's home. The initial stiffness that had marked the siblings' interactions started to give way to a more relaxed, albeit cautious, camaraderie. Morning coffees were no longer silent affairs. They were punctuated with tentative exchanges and the occasional chuckle, mostly spurred by Clara's anecdotes from a bygone era. One lazy Saturday afternoon, as rain gently tapped against the window panes, Clara found an old album buried under stacks of books in the living room. "Look what I found!" she exclaimed, dusting off the cover and gesturing for her children to join her on the worn-out couch. As they gathered around, Clara flipped through the pages, each photograph a portal to her past. "Here's me with your father at Niagara Falls," she pointed out, her finger tracing the young, joyous faces. "And this one was taken when I backpacked through Europe with my college friends. We were so daring then." Michael leaned in, His interest peaked. "I didn't know you backpacked through Europe, Mom. That's pretty cool." "Oh yes," Clara laughed, her eyes twinkling with a resurgence of old memories. "I was quite the adventurer before settling down. There's a lot I've never told you." This revelation seemed to draw the children in further, their earlier preoccupations temporarily forgotten. Elizabeth, always the skeptic, asked, "Why didn't you ever tell us about these things, Mom?" Clara sighed, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I suppose life just got in the way. We focus so much on the day-to-day that sometimes we forget the stories that made us who we are." The conversation that followed was different from any they had had since arriving. John, usually reticent, shared his dreams of starting a new venture, inspired by Clara's tales of risk and adventure. Annabelle, her eyes softening, admitted how much she missed having time for more than just work. "It's like we're strangers sometimes," she said, her voice a mixture of regret and resolve. "I want to change that. I want us to really know each other, not just as family but as individuals with our own stories." Encouraged by their sister's openness, Elizabeth and Michael also opened up, sharing more about their own challenges and aspirations, their voices blending into a tapestry of shared history and newfound respect. The weeks continued to weave a warmer atmosphere in the Bennett household. Meals became longer, filled with debates and discussions, not just about personal lives but about politics, literature, and personal philosophies. Clara often steered these conversations, subtly nudging her children to reveal more about themselves, while also sharing bits of wisdom she had gathered over the years. One evening, as they cleared the dinner table together, Michael said, "You know, I didn't realize how much I needed this. To just be here, with all of you." Elizabeth, who was usually more reserved with her feelings, nodded in agreement. "It's been eye-opening. I guess we needed to step away from our routines to see what we've been missing out on." As the family found comfort in their evolving relationships, the house seemed to grow warmer, the walls soaked with laughter and the air lighter with shared confidences. The transformation wasn't lost on Clara, who watched her children not just as a mother but as a silent architect of their reunion. As they prepared for bed one night, John lingered by Clara's side. "Thanks, Mom, for bringing us back together. I didn't realize how much I missed everyone until now." Clara hugged him, feeling the sincerity in his words. "There's nothing more important than family, John. Remember that." With the familial bond slowly strengthening, Clara knew the upcoming weeks held more promise. The thawing of old coldness was giving way to the warmth of genuine connection, setting the stage for even deeper explorations of their shared past and, perhaps, their intertwined futures. As she retired for the night, her thoughts lingered on the next chapter, hopeful and content with the progress they had all made. As the weeks melted into a gentle rhythm of rediscovery and shared experiences, Clara's children began to see her in a new light, not merely as the matriarch of their family but as a woman whose life was a tapestry of bold choices and quiet sacrifices. Each story she shared added colors and textures to their understanding of her, transforming their perception from the familial to the deeply personal. One crisp morning, as Clara and Annabelle tended to the garden, Clara's hands moved expertly over the flowers, her fingers brushing the soil with a practiced touch. "Your grandmother taught me how to garden," she explained, her voice soft with nostalgia. "She used to say that gardens were like life. What you sow, you reap." Annabelle, usually caught up in the fast pace of her consulting job, found herself slowing down, her movements mirroring her mother's. "I never knew Grandma was into gardening," she mused, genuinely curious. Clara smiled, a bloom of joy on her face. "Oh, there was a lot to her that few people knew. Just like there's a lot to me." She glanced at Annabelle, a twinkle in her eye. "And to you." This exchange marked a turning point for Annabelle and her siblings. They began to engage more deeply with Clara, asking questions about her youth, her dreams, and the choices she made. Each tale Clara told was a revelation, filled with adventures and misadventures, her years before becoming Mom, painted in vibrant strokes of love, loss, and resilience. Later that week, while sorting through the attic, Michael stumbled upon an old guitar. "Mom, I didn't know you played," he said, bringing the instrument downstairs. Clara laughed, taking the guitar into her hands. "I wasn't very good, but your father loved to hear me play." Her fingers strummed a tentative melody, the notes rusty but sweet. Music was a big part of our lives back then. Michael watched, his previous image of Clara as just his careworn mother fading into a broader, more complex portrait of a woman who had once sung songs in the twilight. John and Elizabeth joined in, carrying more boxes from the attic, each filled with artifacts of Clara's past: journals, photographs, even letters. As they sat around her, Clara opened a journal, reading passages aloud, each word a thread in the rich fabric of her history. "It's strange," John commented, leaning back against the sofa. "All these years, and we've only ever seen you as our mom, not as someone who had a whole life before us." Elizabeth nodded, her analytical mind piecing together this new version of Clara. "It makes me think about all the things we never ask, the stories we assume aren't there because we see you in one role." As they continued to explore Clara's belongings, her life unfolded like a novel they couldn't put down. They saw her not just as the provider, the caretaker, the disciplinarian, but as a young woman who had lived fiercely and loved deeply. The change in their interactions was palpable. They started helping around the house not out of duty but out of a desire to connect with Clara, to learn more about her through the mundane activities that filled her days. Each task, whether cooking together in the kitchen or folding laundry in the living room, became an opportunity for Clara to share more of her past, weaving her history into the fabric of their daily lives. As the sun set one evening, casting long shadows across the living room, Clara and her children sat together, a comfortable silence enveloping them. It was a moment of contentment, of understanding and newfound respect. Clara looked around at her children, their faces reflecting the flickering light of the fireplace, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had reconnected with her children not just as their mother, but as a complete person, her stories a bridge between her past and their present. As they prepared to retire for the night, Clara felt a gentle satisfaction knowing that the bonds they were strengthening now were built on a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of each other. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring more stories, more laughter, and a continued appreciation for the rich tapestry of life they shared, setting the stage for even deeper revelations and family bonding. As the newfound closeness continued to flourish among Clara and her children, a rainy day prompted a deep cleaning spree throughout the old family house. The siblings, more engaged and curious about their mother's past than ever, took to the task with vigor, each room a treasure trove of memories waiting to be uncovered. John, who had taken upon himself to tackle the library, a dusty room seldom used, was sorting through old books and papers when a small, leather-bound journal caught his eye. It was tucked away on a forgotten shelf, hidden behind a row of encyclopedias. The cover was worn, the leather cracked with age, but the pages inside were preserved, the handwriting elegant and flowing. "Hey, everyone, come look at this!" John called out, his voice echoing through the quiet halls. His siblings and Clara gathered around, curiosity painting their faces. As John opened the journal, Clara's breath hitched slightly, her eyes widening with a mix of nostalgia and apprehension. "Oh, that one," she murmured, more to herself than to others. "What is it, Mom?" Elizabeth asked, peering over John's shoulder. "It's my travel journal from when I was with Edward, the explorer," Clara explained, her voice a mix of fondness and sorrow. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the flood of memories she knew would soon follow. John turned the pages slowly, allowing everyone to glimpse the entries. The journal was filled with descriptions of exotic places, sketches of landscapes, and narratives of adventurous escapades. One entry caught his attention, and he read aloud, "The stars over the Sahara were like nothing I'd ever seen before. Edward taught me how to navigate by them, a sea of lights guiding us through the night." "Mom, this is incredible!" Michael exclaimed, his eyes wide with amazement. "I had no idea you did all this." Clara smiled, her eyes misty. "There was a time when adventure was my daily bread. Edward was a wonderful teacher and a brave soul. They continued to read, each page revealing more of Clara's youthful adventures, her brave and spirited past painting a stark contrast to the quiet, reserved mother they thought they knew. Elizabeth, always analytical, noted, "It's like you were a different person, Mom." "Not different, just younger," Clara chuckled. "And perhaps a bit more daring." As they delved deeper into the journal, Clara shared anecdotes that weren't captured in the written words, moments of fear, exhilaration, and the deep connection she had with Edward. "He was more than just a lover or a friend. He was my partner in every sense, in every crazy journey we dared to embark on." Their respect for Clara grew with each story, seeing her not just as their mother, but as a woman who had lived a life of profound depth and bravery. The afternoon faded into evening, and the journal became a bridge not just between past and present, but between Clara and her children, who were seeing her through new eyes. As they prepared dinner together, the conversation was lively, filled with questions about other adventures Clara had experienced. The atmosphere in the house was light, almost celebratory, as they shared laughter and a newfound appreciation for the woman who had raised them. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she felt a contentment she hadn't known in years. Her children knew her now, not just as their caretaker, but as a whole person. She drifted off to sleep, her dreams colored with the vibrant hues of her past adventures, knowing that the next day would bring even more sharing and understanding. The revelations from the journal had opened new channels of communication and respect, setting the stage for further explorations into the hidden depths of each other's lives. The following morning, as the house basked in a peaceful silence, Elizabeth decided to organize Clara's home office, a space cluttered with papers, books, and old photographs. As she sorted through a stack of documents, a folder slipped from the pile, spilling its contents onto the floor. Among the scattered papers, a legal document caught her eye, its official seal and formal language stark against the casual mess. Curious, Elizabeth picked it up and skimmed the contents. Her brow furrowed as she read the terms of a substantial inheritance, detailed provisions, and stipulations that Clara had never mentioned. The magnitude of what she held made her heart race. This was not just any inheritance, it was a fortune that could change their lives. "Michael, John, come here," she called out, her voice a mix of excitement and concern. Michael was the first to enter, his steps hurried. "What's up?" he asked, noticing the document in her hand. "It's about Mom's inheritance from Edward. Look at this." Elizabeth handed him the paper, pointing to the specific clauses about asset distribution and conditions. As John joined them, reading over Michael's shoulder, their expressions turned serious. This is huge. Why wouldn't Mom tell us about this?" Michael questioned, his mind racing with implications. "She probably didn't want us to worry, or maybe she wanted to test us, see if we really cared about her or just the money," John suggested, always the one to give Clara the benefit of the doubt. "But this changes things," Elizabeth interjected, her analytical mind piecing together potential outcomes. "If she's deemed incompetent, legally, this could go to probate, get tied up. We could help manage it, ensure it's used properly." Michael nodded slowly, his thoughts aligning with Elizabeth's. "We might need to consider legal steps, for her own good and for the estate," he said, the weight of the decision clear in his voice. John, however, shook his head, his voice firm. "No, we can't just assume she can't handle her affairs. That's not fair to her, and it's not what she would want." The room grew tense, the document between them a catalyst for a debate that none of them had anticipated. Elizabeth paced the room, her mind working through legal scenarios. Michael leaned against the desk, conflicted but pragmatic. John stood apart, his loyalty to Clara's autonomy clear in his stance. "We need more information before we make any decisions," Elizabeth finally said, breaking the heavy silence. "Let's talk to Mom, hear it from her, understand her wishes." "Agreed," Michael replied, though his tone suggested he was still considering all options. John, relieved, nodded. "Let's do that. She deserves to be part of this conversation." They decided to confront Clara that evening, planning to approach the topic delicately. As the day progressed, each sibling wrestled with their thoughts, the discovery revealing not just secrets about Clara's inheritance but also about their motives and fears. Dinner that night was a subdued affair, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Clara, unaware of the storm brewing, chatted lightly about a book she was reading. Her children exchanged glances, their minds on the impending discussion. Finally, as they cleared the table, Elizabeth spoke up. "Mom, there's something we need to discuss. It's important." Clara, sensing the seriousness of her tone, nodded. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" The siblings gathered in the living room, the legal document now on the coffee table. Clara listened quietly as they explained their discovery, her expression unreadable. After a long pause, she sighed. "I didn't want this to cause a rift between us. This inheritance, it's not just about money. It's about trust, about family." The discussion that followed was intense yet necessary, as they navigated through their concerns and hopes. Clara reassured them of her capabilities but also listened to their worries. As they talked, it became clear that this was more than just a legal matter. It was a test of their family bonds, a defining moment in their relationship. As the night deepened, and the debate found moments of pause, the siblings realized that this was only the beginning of a more complex journey. They agreed to seek legal advice together, a united front for now, as they planned their next steps. The seeds of doubt and protection sown, they knew the coming days would bring more challenges, but also, hopefully, a deeper understanding of each other and what it truly meant to be a family. In the days following their intense family discussion, the oldest siblings, Michael and Elizabeth, found themselves often whispering in corners of the house, their minds burdened with concern and strategic calculations. Their determination to protect the family assets, as they saw it, drove them to consider steps that just weeks before would have seemed unthinkable. One morning, while Clara was out visiting a friend, Michael and Elizabeth sat in the study, a pile of financial statements and legal papers spread out before them. "We need to ensure the estate is protected, and honestly, I'm not sure Mom is in the best position to manage this," Elizabeth said, her voice a mix of frustration and resolve. Michael nodded, his brow furrowed. "I agree, but this isn't just about legalities. We need to think about Mom's well-being too. If we go down this path, are we really acting in her best interest, or are we just, I don't know, taking over?" "It's both, Michael. It's about ensuring she doesn't make a mistake that affects all of us. We could set up a trust, appoint a guardian to help her manage her affairs," Elizabeth suggested, her tone pragmatic yet tinged with a hint of doubt. Meanwhile, Clara, though outwardly serene, was not as oblivious to her children's undertakings as they might have hoped. Her friend's visit had been a cover for a discreet meeting with her attorney, Mr. Jennings, a loyal family friend who had served her legal needs for decades. In the quiet privacy of a small cafe, Clara laid out her concerns. "They're planning something, Jennings. I can feel it. They think I'm not capable of handling my own affairs," Clara confided, her voice steady but her hands betraying a slight tremor. Mr. Jennings, a sharp-minded octogenarian with a kind face, nodded understandingly. "Clara, you've always been sharp. We can set up safeguards to protect you and the estate. Perhaps it's time to establish a clear directive that outlines your wishes should your ability to manage your affairs come into question." Clara agreed, her mind clear. "I want to protect them too, but not at the cost of my autonomy. Let's prepare something that shows I'm still capable." As they worked together, drafting legal documents and setting up future appointments, Clara felt a mix of sadness and resolve. She had hoped her children would see her as capable, but she was prepared to fight to maintain her independence. Back at the house, the tension was palpable. John, who had remained largely quiet during the initial discussions, noticed the secretive talks between his older siblings. One evening, he confronted them as they huddled over some papers in the living room. "What's going on? What are you two planning?" John's voice was stern, more assertive than usual. Michael looked up, his expression conflicted. "John, we're just looking out for Mom. We think it might be best if we help her manage her finances, maybe set up a trust." John shook his head, disappointment etched across his face. "You mean declare her incompetent? That's not help, that's control. Have you even asked her what she wants?" The argument that followed was heated, with John staunchly defending Clara's capability and right to independence. Elizabeth tried to reason with him, emphasizing the legal and financial risks involved. "Think about it, John. What if she makes a mistake? What if she's taken advantage of? We're doing this to protect her," Elizabeth argued, her voice laced with urgency. But John was unmoved. Protecting her doesn't mean taking away her rights. We should be supporting her, not plotting behind her back. As they argued, Clara returned home, overhearing the tail end of their conversation. Her heart sank, but she was prepared. Walking into the room with quiet dignity, she addressed them all. "I know you're worried about me and the inheritance, but I am not yet ready to hand over my life to anyone else. I've taken steps to ensure I can manage my affairs as long as I'm able. Let's respect each other's positions and move forward together." The room fell silent, the siblings caught off guard by Clara's assertiveness and preparedness. As they digested her words, Clara knew this was just the beginning of a longer journey toward mutual understanding and trust. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she pondered the future, her resolve strengthened, knowing the next day would bring more discussions, more planning, and hopefully, a path forward that honored both her independence and her children's concerns. The morning after Clara's assertive declaration, the Bennett household was shrouded in a tense silence, each member of the family lost in thought. John, the youngest, paced the length of the kitchen, his mind churning with the remnants of last night's revelations. The scent of coffee did little to soothe his troubled thoughts. As Michael and Elizabeth entered the kitchen, their expressions somber, John turned to face them, his resolve hardened. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm, cutting through the quiet. Michael sighed, leaning against the counter, while Elizabeth folded her arms, her demeanor defensive. "John, we've been over this. It's about ensuring everything is handled properly." "No, it's about control," John countered, his gaze unwavering. "You're letting fear and greed dictate your actions. Mom is capable. She's proved that time and again. Why can't you trust her?" Elizabeth frowned, her frustration apparent. "It's not as simple as you think, John. We're trying to protect our family's future. By undermining our mother's present?" John's retort was sharp. "What are we teaching ourselves? What are we showing Mom about our trust in her?" The conversation grew heated as pent-up grievances and fears came to the fore. Accusations were thrown, old wounds reopened, and the siblings were forced to confront not just their plans for the inheritance but also the underlying layers of their relationships. Michael, trying to mediate, lowered his voice. "This isn't just about the money. It's about making sure we don't end up in a mess if something goes wrong. But maybe we are going about it the wrong way." John, his anger simmering down, took a deep breath. "Look, I get it. We all want what's best for the family. But we need to be a team on this, not adversaries. We should be supporting each other, not plotting against each other." As the siblings continued to hash out their feelings and thoughts, Clara quietly entered the room, her presence unnoticed until she spoke. "Children, if we can't face these challenges as a family, how can we face them at all?" Her words, gentle yet laden with wisdom, paused the brewing storm. The siblings looked at each other, their defenses slowly crumbling as the truth of Clara's words sank in. "Mom's right," Elizabeth admitted, her voice softer. "We've let our fears get the best of us. We need to trust more, not just in Mom but in each other." The discussion that followed was more open and honest than any they had had before. They talked about their individual fears about the future, their hopes, and how they could support each other better. It was a conversation filled with vulnerability and understanding, a pivotal moment that began to mend the fractures within their family. By the afternoon, a plan began to form, one that involved transparent communication and joint decisions regarding the inheritance, with Clara's involvement and approval at every step. As the day drew to a close, the siblings found themselves in the living room, a sense of camaraderie slowly rebuilding among them. They agreed to meet with Clara's lawyer as a united front, to understand the legal aspects and to ensure that Clara's wishes and autonomy were respected. The challenges of the day brought painful realizations and tough confrontations, but as night fell, the Bennett family felt a renewed sense of purpose and unity. They had come to terms with their flaws and fears, ready to face the future together. As Clara watched her children talking and planning, a gentle smile graced her lips. Tomorrow, she thought, would bring another step in their journey, a family meeting with a lawyer, where they would lay the foundation for a future that honored both her independence and their collective security. The following morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the emotional storms of the previous days. Clara had arranged for a family meeting in the living room, the heart of their home, where so many of their family's pivotal moments had unfolded. The air was thick with anticipation as Clara's children gathered, unsure of what to expect but aware that their mother had something significant to share. Clara waited until everyone was seated, her demeanor calm yet imbued with a sense of purpose. She looked around at her children, her gaze lingering on each one, reinforcing the gravity of the moment. "I've asked you all here because there are things about the inheritance and about Edward's will that you need to understand," Clara began, her voice steady. "I believe it's time you know the full extent of his last wishes." Michael leaned forward, his interest piqued. "What exactly are we talking about, Mom?" Clara took a deep breath, the weight of decades resting on her shoulders. "Edward's will contains a unique stipulation. He left this fortune not just to me, but with a condition attached. A condition meant to ensure that his legacy would promote not just wealth but something far more valuable." Elizabeth, always keen on specifics, interjected, "What kind of condition?" Clara paused for effect, ensuring she had everyone's full attention. "The inheritance is contingent upon my proving that my family can live and act as a genuinely loving and cohesive unit. Edward knew the stories of our family, the struggles, and the distances that grew between us. His condition was that the fortune would be fully accessible only when there is clear, undeniable proof that those distances have been bridged, that the values of family, love, and unity are alive and thriving among us." The room fell silent, each sibling processing the ramifications of what Clara had just revealed. The idea that their financial inheritance was directly tied to their emotional and relational inheritance was both novel and daunting. John was the first to speak, breaking the silence. "So, you're saying the estate is essentially locked unless we can prove that we're a, happy family?" Clara nodded. "Not just happy, but genuinely supportive and connected. It's about more than just appearances or temporary truces for the sake of wealth. Edward wanted this to be a catalyst for real, lasting change." Michael rubbed his temples, trying to align this new information with his own expectations. "This is unexpected. It's like he's still guiding us, even now." Elizabeth, ever the pragmatist, asked, "How do we even prove something like that? What constitutes proof in this scenario?" Clara smiled slightly, appreciating her daughter's directness. "That's where we must be creative and sincere. It's not about staging interactions for the benefit of lawyers or executors. It's about living out the values that make a family strong. It's about rebuilding and maintaining the bridges we've let fall into disrepair." As they discussed more about the will's conditions, ideas began to form. Plans for shared projects, family therapy sessions, and community involvement activities that might help them meet the stipulation's requirements but also bring them closer as a family. The meeting ended with a newfound understanding and a shared goal. The siblings agreed to take deliberate steps towards healing their relationships, not just for the sake of the inheritance but for their own sakes and the legacy they would one day leave behind. As they dispersed, Clara felt a cautious optimism. She had gambled on Edward's unconventional condition, hoping it would restore the family unity that had frayed over the years. Now, it seemed there was a real chance her gamble might pay off. That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she reflected on the day's events, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, she was content, knowing she had set in motion a plan that might finally heal her family. In the weeks that followed Clara's revelation about the will's unique conditions, the Bennett family found themselves deeply engaged in what felt like both a challenge and an opportunity. Clara watched as her children undertook the task of proving their unity and love, not just to meet the legal requirements of the will, but to genuinely reconnect as a family. The living room, once a battleground of conflicting interests, became a workshop of sorts, with whiteboards filled with ideas and calendars marked with family activities. John, the youngest, who had been the most resistant to the idea of manipulating their behavior for the sake of the inheritance, emerged as a surprising advocate for genuine change. One afternoon, as the family gathered to discuss their progress and plan future activities, John stood up, his expression serious yet hopeful. "I know this started out feeling a bit forced, like we were just trying to check boxes," he began, capturing everyone's attention. "But I've seen changes, real changes in all of us. I think we have a chance here not just to meet the terms of this will, but to actually become the family we've always pretended to be at reunions." Michael, leaning against the back of the sofa, nodded slowly. "You're right. It's one thing to act like a family for the sake of money, but it's become more than that. I find myself looking forward to our meetings, our projects. It's refreshing." Elizabeth, who had always taken a more cynical view of the will's conditions, adjusted her glasses, her voice thoughtful. "I was skeptical, I admit. But seeing us all work together, solving problems, sharing successes and setbacks, it's been enlightening. I've learned more about each of you in these last few weeks than I have in years." Clara, sitting quietly in her armchair, felt a swell of pride. She observed as John encouraged his siblings to share specific moments from the past weeks that had impacted them. Each story revealed layers of empathy, understanding, and a willingness to support each other that had been dormant for too long. "Remember last Saturday when we helped at the community garden?" John asked, a smile playing on his lips. "When Mike got all competitive with the weed pulling, but then ended up teaching those kids how to plant tomatoes. That was more than just fulfilling a requirement. That was real." Laughter filled the room, a lightness that had been missing in their interactions for years. Clara interjected, her voice gentle yet firm. "This is what Edward hoped for. Not for you to perform as a family, but to be one. To rely on each other, respect each other." As the meeting drew to a close, the siblings agreed on their next steps, which included regular family dinners, continuing their volunteer work, and starting a new tradition of monthly family outings. John, once the most detached, now took the lead in organizing these events, his enthusiasm infectious. As everyone started to leave the room, Elizabeth lingered behind, approaching Clara. "Mom, I'm sorry for how I approached all of this initially. It's turned into something beautiful. Thank you for pushing us, even when we resisted." Clara reached out, squeezing Elizabeth's hand. "I knew you could do it. I've always believed in you, in all of you." That night, as Clara sat by her bedroom window, looking out at the stars, she felt a deep sense of peace. The transformation in her family was palpable, and while they had not yet fully met the conditions of the will, they were on their way, not just to securing an inheritance, but to reclaiming a sense of family that was far more valuable. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, but for now, Clara allowed herself to bask in the glow of what they had achieved. The path forward was clear, and for the first time in a long time, it was one they would walk together. The new spirit of cooperation and genuine affection that had begun to permeate the Bennett household continued to deepen in the days following their family meeting. The once looming shadow of the inheritance seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the light of genuine familial connections. One sunny morning, Clara found herself in the kitchen surrounded by her children, each taking part in preparing a family brunch, a rarity given their previously conflicting schedules. John cracked eggs with a skillful hand, Elizabeth flipped pancakes, and Michael brewed a strong pot of coffee. The laughter and chatter filled the room with warmth that spilled over into every corner of the house. "Remember how we used to make breakfast together when you were kids?" Clara asked, a nostalgic smile playing on her lips as she watched her children cooperate and tease each other good-naturedly. "Yeah, and you would always tell us how the best pancakes are made with extra love," John replied, handing a stack of golden brown pancakes to Elizabeth, who set them on a large platter. "And a lot of butter," Michael chimed in, his voice light. "Can't forget the butter." The simple act of making brunch together seemed to unwind years of distance and busy lives that had kept them apart. They ate together, sharing stories and plans for the future, discussing everything from work to personal dreams, a conversation that would have seemed impossible months earlier. In the following weeks, this newfound camaraderie manifested in various ways. They implemented a rotating schedule where each sibling took a day to spend time with Clara, doing activities she loved. One afternoon, Elizabeth and Clara spent hours poring over old photo albums, reminiscing about family holidays and milestones. Another day, Michael took Clara to a local art exhibition, discussing each piece with her, appreciating her insights and perspectives. On Saturdays, John organized gardening sessions with Clara in her beloved garden. They pruned, planted, and sometimes simply sat in silence, enjoying the tranquility of nature. "You know, I never appreciated how peaceful this is," John confessed one such afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow as he looked around at the thriving garden. Clara, planting a new batch of marigolds, smiled at him. "It's never too late to start, John. Gardens, like people, grow and change all the time." As the season changed, so did the rhythm of the Bennett family. They started looking forward to their days with Clara, finding that caring for her also meant caring for their relationships with each other. It wasn't just about fulfilling a condition anymore. It was about rebuilding a family that had lost its way. One evening, as they gathered in the living room after a day spent repainting the exterior of the house, a group effort that turned more into a paint fight than a chore, Clara looked around at her laughing children and felt a surge of contentment. "You know," she started, her voice catching a bit, "I used to dream about days like today. Days where we could all be together like this, without worries or agendas. Just family." "We're getting there, Mom," Elizabeth said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Thanks to you, we're really getting there." As they cleaned up, their easy banter continued, a testament to the barriers they had broken down and the bonds they had strengthened. They planned for the next family project, a small renovation in Clara's house, with everyone pitching in ideas and offering to help. That night, Clara went to bed with a heart full of gratitude. They had not only embraced the challenge set by Edward's will but had transcended it. They were no longer just a family by blood but a family by choice, bound by love, respect, and genuine affection. Tomorrow would bring another day of shared tasks and laughter, another step forward in their journey together, and Clara couldn't wait to see what it would hold. The warm glow of the early evening sun bathed Clara's living room in golden hues as the family gathered once more, a sense of anticipation mingling with the comfortable familiarity that had grown between them. Clara, sitting at the head of the room with a serene expression, cleared her throat gently, capturing the attention of her children who were scattered around on various couches and chairs. "I've called you all here today because I've made a decision about the inheritance," Clara began, her voice steady and clear. "These past weeks have shown me more than I could have hoped for. I've seen us grow together as a family, rediscovering what truly matters." Her children leaned in, listening intently. John, who had taken a seat close to Clara, gave her an encouraging nod, his expression one of quiet support. Clara continued, "I've decided that the bulk of the inheritance will be donated to charity. There are so many out there who need this more than we do. However, I want to do something special for John." John looked up, surprised. "Me, Mom? Why?" Clara smiled warmly at him. "Because, John, you've shown an exceptional amount of loyalty and love, not just to me but to your siblings as well. You've been a cornerstone in bringing us back together. You've encouraged us to be better, not for the sake of the money but for the sake of our family. The room filled with a soft, reflective silence as Clara's words sank in. Michael, who had always been the more practical one, was the first to break the silence. "Mom, that's incredibly generous of you. I know I started off skeptical about all this, but what you're doing, it's really something." Elizabeth, who had often struggled with balancing her analytical mind with her emotions, added, "It's more than generous, it's transformative. It's made me think about what I value, what we all value. And you, John, you really have been amazing through all this." John, clearly moved by his mother's words and the support of his siblings, managed a small smile. "Thanks, everyone. I just wanted us to be a family again. That's more important to me than any amount of money." Clara nodded, pleased with the response. "That's exactly why I'm doing this. We've found something much more precious than gold. We've found our way back to each other." As the discussion turned towards which charities would benefit from their generosity, the family found themselves united not only in their newfound closeness but in their purpose. Plans were made, suggestions were discussed, and everyone contributed ideas with enthusiasm. The evening waned into night, and as the family eventually said their goodbyes, there was a palpable sense of fulfillment in the air. They had started this journey driven by the prospect of wealth, but they were continuing it driven by the wealth of their relationships. Clara, left alone in the quiet aftermath, felt a deep, resounding peace. She had ignited a change that would extend beyond her family, reaching out into the community, into the lives of those less fortunate. And she had secured the legacy of a family that valued love over gold. Tomorrow would bring the task of formally arranging the donations and finalizing her plans for John's reward. But tonight, Clara allowed herself a moment to simply bask in the glow of a family reunited and a mission accomplished. The morning after Clara's profound decision to donate the majority of her inheritance, the Bennett household was enveloped in a quiet buzz of activity and optimism. The family was gathered in the living room, sipping coffee and discussing potential charities for the donations when a sudden, unexpected knock on the door halted their conversation. Clara, slightly puzzled by the unannounced visitor, rose to answer it. As she swung the door open, her breath caught in her throat. Standing before her, looking older but unmistakably himself, was Edward Langley, the explorer she had loved and mourned, believed to have been lost to the wilds of nature long ago. "Edward, is it really you?" Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in disbelief. "It's me, Clara," Edward said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry it's taken me so long to come back." The children, alerted by their mother's shocked exclamation, rushed to the doorway. They stared in astonishment at the man they had only known through stories, their mother's first great love, now standing alive and well in their midst. "Mom, who is this?" John asked, his brow furrowed in confusion and curiosity. "This, my children, is Edward Langley, the man who inspired so much of what you know about me," Clara introduced him, her eyes never leaving Edward's face. Edward stepped inside, his eyes sweeping over Clara's children. "I've heard so much about all of you. I'm sorry I couldn't return sooner. My journey took me places from which it was difficult to return, both physically and emotionally." As they all moved into the living room, Clara offered Edward a seat, still reeling from the shock of seeing him again. Edward explained that after a series of misadventures and miscommunications, he had been isolated in a remote area, with no way to contact the outside world until recently. "But why come back now?" Elizabeth asked, the analytical side of her needing to understand. Edward sighed, a wistful look crossing his features. "I came back because I realized that there's more to life than exploring unknown lands. After hearing about how Clara used my inheritance to bring her family together and her plans to help others, I knew I needed to be part of that, to make my remaining years meaningful." He then shared his vision of establishing a foundation to support abandoned elders, inspired by Clara's generosity and commitment to family. "I've seen too many forgotten souls in my travels," Edward continued. "I want to help them, give them the dignity and care they deserve." The family listened, moved by Edward's plans and his heartfelt return. Discussions began on how they could integrate this new mission with their existing charitable efforts, excited by the potential of working together on such a compassionate project. As the day turned to evening, the shock of Edward's return transformed into a warm acceptance. The family, including Edward, shared a meal, stories, and laughter, the bonds of past and present intertwining. Clara, watching her family interact with Edward, felt a deep sense of closure and a new beginning. Her past had returned not to haunt her but to join her in building a future. As night fell, and the family said their goodnights, Clara and Edward lingered in the living room, talking late into the night. They discussed plans for the foundation, but also reminisced about their shared past, each story weaving them closer together again. Tomorrow would bring the challenge of integrating Edward into their lives fully and beginning their work on the new foundation. But tonight, Clara felt that her heart, like her family, was whole once more. The morning sun cast a hopeful glow over the Bennett household, symbolizing a new chapter for Clara and her family, now including Edward. After the emotional reunions and startling revelations, they gathered in Clara's spacious kitchen, maps and plans spread across the table, each person ready to contribute to the ambitious project they had embraced together, the community center for the elderly. "We've got a lot to consider: location, funding, and the services we want to offer," Michael started, his business acumen coming to the forefront as he pointed to the potential sites on the map. Edward, who had years of experience in managing logistics from his explorations, nodded in agreement. "It's crucial we choose a location that's accessible. We want to ensure it's a place that feels welcoming and easy to reach for those who need it most." Elizabeth, her laptop open and filled with tabs on grant applications and charity networks, chimed in. "I've been looking into funding options. There are several grants available for community projects like this, especially ones focused on elder care. We can apply for these and also organize fundraising events." John, who had taken a keen interest in the architectural design, laid out some preliminary sketches. "I was thinking about making the center as eco-friendly as possible. Solar panels for energy, rainwater harvesting systems, and plenty of green spaces around for the residents to enjoy." Clara listened to her children and Edward discussing, her heart swelling with pride at their enthusiasm and teamwork. "What about the programs we'll offer?" she asked, bringing another important aspect to the forefront. "It's not just about a place to stay. We need to provide activities that engage their minds and spirits." "Absolutely," Edward agreed, his eyes lighting up with ideas. "We could have art and music therapy sessions, gardening clubs, and even tech classes to help them connect with modern technologies and their families." As the discussion flowed, everyone contributed passionately, bringing their unique skills and perspectives to the table. The project began to take shape, transforming from a series of ideas into a tangible plan that promised to make a significant impact. Throughout the days and weeks that followed, the family found themselves more united than ever. The community center project not only allowed them to work together towards a common goal, but also helped them heal old wounds. The shared purpose drove them, and the act of creation brought a new level of understanding and appreciation among them. Michael and John took on the task of overseeing the construction, regularly updating the family with progress and tackling any challenges head-on. Elizabeth spearheaded the legal and financial aspects, ensuring that the project stayed on a solid footing. Clara and Edward, with their wealth of experience and wisdom, became the soul of the project, infusing every decision with compassion and foresight. One afternoon, as they reviewed the latest construction updates, Clara proposed, "Why don't we all write a letter or a poem about what this project means to us? We could display these in the entrance hall of the center once it's opened." "That's a beautiful idea," Elizabeth responded warmly. "It would give a personal touch and show everyone who comes through the doors what this place is built on: love and unity." The family agreed enthusiastically, each eager to express what the journey had meant to them. This activity, while simple, served as a profound reflection of their growth and the bonds they had strengthened. As they continued to build the community center, each brick and beam laid was a testament to their dedication to bettering the lives of others. It wasn't just a building, It was a beacon of hope and a symbol of their renewed family ties. With the foundation set and the walls rising, the Bennett family looked forward to the day they could open the doors to the community. They planned a grand opening ceremony, anticipating the joy of sharing their vision and efforts with the world. As evening settled over the Bennett home, Clara sat back, content and fulfilled. Tomorrow, they would visit the site again, but for tonight, she reveled in the peace that comes from dreams becoming reality. On the morning of the grand opening of the community center, the air was filled with a palpable sense of accomplishment and anticipation. Clara stood outside the newly finished building, her family by her side, looking up at the modern yet welcoming structure that now stood as a testament to their unity and hard work. The sign above the entrance read, "Langley Bennett Community Center for Elders," a nod to the legacy and the love that had inspired its creation. Michael, adjusting his tie nervously, turned to Clara with a smile. "You ready for this, Mom?" Clara nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "More than ready. This is a dream come true." The ribbon-cutting ceremony was attended by community leaders, donors, and future residents of the center, all eager to see the result of the Bennett family's efforts. John, who had been particularly hands-on during the construction, shared a few words before the ribbon cutting. "As we open the doors to the Langley Bennett Community Center today," John began, his voice strong and clear, "we're not just opening a facility, we're opening our hearts to the community. This center stands as a promise to care, to connect, and to cherish the elders who have given us so much." Applause filled the air as Clara, with a ceremonial pair of scissors, cut the ribbon. The crowd moved inside, where Elizabeth led a tour of the facility. She pointed out the eco-friendly features John had integrated, the art and music therapy rooms that Edward had proposed, and the tech-friendly spaces designed to keep residents connected with the modern world. As they walked through the spacious hallways, Clara overheard snippets of conversation from future residents and their families, expressing excitement and gratitude. "It's beautiful, just the kind of place I'd want for my parents," one woman remarked to her friend. In the main hall, Edward had organized a small exhibition of photographs documenting the center's construction, each image capturing moments of effort, frustration, joy, and ultimately, success. Guests paused to view the photos, visibly moved by the tangible evidence of the project's journey. Later, as the formalities gave way to a gentle evening reception, Clara took a moment to step outside, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. She reflected on the journey they had undertaken, not just in building the center, but in rebuilding their family. Turning back to the festivities, she saw her children mingling with guests, laughing and sharing stories. Edward came up beside her, handing her a glass of champagne. "To the future," Edward toasted, his eyes reflecting pride and a deep-seated joy. "To love and legacy," Clara responded, clinking her glass against his. As the evening drew to a close, Clara felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The community center was not just a building, it was a beacon of hope and love, a place that would nurture the community just as her family had nurtured it into existence. Exhausted but elated, Clara and her family began to say their goodbyes to the last of the guests. They agreed to meet the next morning to discuss the feedback they had received and to plan the first official activities for the center. Clara went to bed that night with a heart full of peace, knowing she had helped create something that would outlive her and serve as a legacy of love, a legacy that would continue to grow, just like the bonds of her rejuvenated family. The community center was abuzz with excitement and warmth on a crisp autumn morning, its halls decorated with balloons and streamers in soft pastels and vibrant golds, the colors chosen to celebrate Clara's 90th birthday. The building that had become a symbol of their renewed family bonds and commitment to the community was now the setting for a personal milestone. As guests began to arrive, Clara, radiant and sprightly at 90, greeted each one with the grace and warmth that had become her trademark. Her children, Michael, Elizabeth, and John, along with Edward, were bustling around, ensuring that everything was perfect for the celebration. "Mom, can you believe it? 90 years, Michael said, wrapping his arm around Clara as they watched friends and family gather. Clara laughed softly, her eyes twinkling. "Believe it. I feel it every morning." but I wouldn't change a thing. Especially not this last year. It's brought us all so much closer." The party moved into the main hall, where a large banner read, "Happy 90th birthday, Clara." Underneath the banner, a projector displayed photos from Clara's life, including many from the recent months spent building the community center. As they sat down to a catered lunch, John stood to make a toast. "To Mom, who has taught us more about life, love, and resilience than anyone I know. Your strength and compassion have not only built this center, but have rebuilt this family." "Happy birthday, Mom." Glasses clinked, and the room filled with a chorus of "Happy birthday," followed by applause. After the meal, Elizabeth encouraged guests to share stories of their experiences with Clara, turning the event into a heartfelt reflection on the impact Clara had had on their lives. One after another, relatives, old friends, and new acquaintances from the community center stood to recount tales of Clara's kindness, her sage advice, and her indefatigable spirit. Many spoke of how the community center had already begun to change their lives or the lives of their loved ones. As the testimonials continued, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment and connection. Her eyes occasionally filled with tears as she listened to the profound effect her vision and actions had had on so many. Then, Edward, who had quietly supported every phase of the center's development and the family's reconciliation, took the floor. "Clara, you envisioned a place that could be a beacon of hope and help for many. This center, and your beautiful family's commitment to it, stands as a lasting legacy to your love and generosity. You have turned your personal history into a collective future." The family ended the day by unveiling a new plaque at the entrance of the community center. It bore Clara's name and the date, with a quote that Clara had chosen. "Here, we gather to share the joys of yesterday, the blessings of today, and the hopes of tomorrow." As the party wound down and the guests departed, the family lingered, reluctant to end the special day. They sat together, recounting their own journeys of the past months, challenges faced, lessons learned, and the unexpected joys of coming together with a shared purpose. Clara, surrounded by her family, felt a profound peace. "I couldn't have wished for a better birthday or a better gift than seeing all of you so happy and united," she mused aloud. "Thank you for embracing my dreams, and for giving me so many reasons to look forward to each new day." As they cleaned up together, the family was already discussing plans for the next projects and events at the center, eager to continue building on the foundation they had established. Tomorrow would be another busy day at the center, but tonight, they celebrated, not just Clara's 90 years, but the enduring bonds of a family reborn. As the evening shadows lengthened across the newly inaugurated community center, the Bennett family lingered in the warmth of the setting sun, the echoes of laughter from Clara's birthday celebration still resonating in the air. The day had been a profound affirmation of all they had achieved and overcome together. Clara sat on a newly installed bench in the center's garden, a serene spot overlooking a small fountain. Her children and Edward gathered around her. The garden was peaceful, with a gentle sound of water mingling with the rustling leaves, creating a perfect backdrop for reflection. "Look at this place," Clara began, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "When I first dreamt of the center, it was just an idea, a hope that we could create something lasting, something that could make a difference. But this," she gestured around, "this is so much more than I ever imagined." Michael, sitting beside her, took her hand. "Mom, you've always been the heart of this family. You brought us back together, not just with each other, but with what's truly important." Elizabeth, who had always prided herself on her practicality, found herself moved by the emotional depth of the moment. "I've learned a lot about priorities," she admitted. "It's not just about being successful out there, but about being meaningful here, with each other." John, who had found a new purpose in leading many of the center's initiatives, smiled at his siblings. "We've turned a page, haven't we? I mean, look at us. Working together, caring not just for Mom but for a whole community." Edward, who had quietly observed the siblings, added, "Clara, you've done more than redirect your family. You've inspired a ripple effect of goodwill and compassion that will be felt far beyond these walls." As they all nodded in agreement, Clara felt a surge of joy and contentment. She looked at each of her children, seeing not just the adults they had become, but the unified family they now represented. "I am so proud of each of you," she said, her eyes glistening. "This journey wasn't always easy, but it was worth every step. We've rediscovered not just our love for each other, but our purpose together." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow that seemed to wrap the family in a warm embrace. Clara stood up slowly, supported by Michael and John, and they walked back towards the center. As they reached the doors, Clara paused, turning to look back at the garden, the fountain, and the paths they had walked together. "This center, this place, it's a promise fulfilled," she mused aloud. "A promise to each other and to the community. It's a testament to what love and unity can achieve." The family nodded, feeling the weight and the truth of her words. They stepped inside, ready to continue their work, to keep building on the foundation of love and selflessness that Clara had laid. The community center was not the end of their journey, but a new beginning, a beacon of hope and connectivity in their lives and the lives of others. That night, as Clara lay in bed, the quiet of the house around her felt different, fuller, richer. She closed her eyes, a smile curving her lips, as she drifted into sleep, her heart full. The love of her family, the joy of the community they were nurturing together, was more than she had dared hope for. It was her legacy, beautifully, unequivocally fulfilled.
So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support and see you in the next videos.